Hello, everybody. Welcome back to I Saw a Bird Audubon Spring Migration Show. This is our 9th episode, and I'm Christine Lynn, joining you from my home here in Dallas, Texas. And I recently saw a Carolina chickadee. So this actually happened after I installed a new suet feeder in the yard, and I had never seen a Carolina chickadee near my home before, so that was a really cool treat. What about you, David?
Suet brought them right in, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, hi everybody. This is David Ringer coming at you from Manhattan, New York. And some of the regular viewers of the show have heard me talk before about the American kestrels in my neighborhood. Well, they have fledged some young, and so I got to see the kestrel family soaring around on our strong south winds today outside my window over the buildings of New York City, which was really wonderful. So thanks for coming back. This is our monthly show, as Christine said, and we're very excited to have you with us on your screens tonight. We've got a great lineup for the show. As you can see here, we're going to be talking through what to do when you find baby birds, which a lot of people are doing this time of year. You're also going to get to see a few, which we're excited about. We're going to do an interview with some of the co-founders of Black Birders Week. We're going to talk about an Audubon outreach program called Let's Go Birding Together. And then we're going to give you a sneak peek of the summer edition of Audubon Magazine, which is coming soon to your home if you're an Audubon member. So we'll end finally with our typical segment called If You Do One Thing, and that's about how to help birds wherever you are this week.
Cool, thank you, David. So to start off, I am super excited to introduce our next guest, Rita McMahon. And Rita is a co-founder of the Wild Bird Fund, which is a New York City-based rehabilitation center that provides medical care and rehabilitation to local wildlife so that they can be released back into the wild. Welcome to the show, Rita.
Hello, Christine. It's very nice to be there.
Hello, how are you?
Here we are. Okay, thank you. It's been an exciting spring into summer. We get as many as 30 young birds a day being brought to us. And yeah, they're babies, and they are fledglings or they're nestlings. And it's a whole crew of people who work to try to make sure that the birds are not being kidnapped, because people want to help them, but they might be picking up the wrong bird. And in that case, it's a lesson in what is a fledgling versus a nestling. And it's a great lesson to learn.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into our first question, actually. So this is a question we get a lot this time of year. As you said, we're spring going into summer. And a lot of people on our social platforms will ask, what do I do with this baby bird? And so a lot of people are surprised to hear that sometimes the best thing you can do is to just leave a bird where it is. So if you want to go over how exactly you can tell when a baby bird needs help or not, we'll pull up a graphic as well to help with that.
That would be great. Let's do that. Oh, I love this. Thank you. And this came from Healers of the Wild to try to help us understand. So you see a baby bird on the ground, and he's young, and you can tell he's young, and you go, oh my gosh, the people say, he fell from the nest, he fell from the tree. Every baby bird falls from the tree. Every juvenile bird either tries to flutter down or it tries to soar down, and that's their first challenge. It's really a matter of timing. Did that bird come out in time, or was it premature? So the main thing to do is to observe it, to look, to see, is it hurt? Is it sick? Is it running around? Is it chirping? Is it animated? Or is it really just staying still and hunkered down? So the parents actually, I don't know what they say to them, but they teach them, I want you to hide now. You go hide by that door, by this or that. Stay quiet until I come back. So the fact that it's just huddled in a corner doesn't mean it's alone. The poor parents, think of them. The father and the mother are out there. They're not just tending one baby on the ground. They're actually tending possibly 3 or 4, and they're very busy. Not only are they trying to keep track of them, they have to go find the food for those little hungry guys, and that is quite a job. So the person who wants to help the bird that they found on the ground really needs first to observe. Are they hurt, sick, or injured? And next, they have to determine if it's a fledgling or a nestling. Now, a nestling, it needs help. It doesn't have all its feathers. It's pretty naked. A fledgling, however, has all its feathers. Even though the tail might be short or the wing is short, its body is fully covered with feathers. And they will be just hopping around, and they aren't flying yet, possibly, but gosh, they're going to be flying. Maybe even the same day or in 1 or 2 days, they're going to be taking wing. So you determine if it's a nestling. Is it naked? Is it not so animated? Or is it the fledgling hopping around, talking, and or hunkering down to the corner? It's old enough to know it shouldn't talk to strangers. So if it's a nestling, the job is to try to get it back into the nest, which is generally one of the hardest things, because if you have a cavity nester, you're not going to get up there. But if it's a nest by a tree or that you can see, and we've put robins back in nests in Central Park and different times, but other birds, other species, it's harder. So, but it's a fledgling, and that's most common versus the nestling. It's on the ground, and that's normal behavior, to just be hopping around, talking, and or hiding in a secure place. The parents are there. The parents have spent a month taking care of this little kid, along with 3 others. And they have invested their whole energies, their life, their force of continuing their species. They are very invested in this animal. So if you nab it, it actually can go back within 2 days, but they will be searching for it in 2 days. And after that, they decide it's died, but they want it. There's the great old wives' tale that if you touch it, the parents won't accept it. They don't care about the smell. In fact, these birds generally don't have great smell. They will take that baby back. So as a fledgling, our greatest challenge is getting people to take the fledglings back who are really doing fine. And they're actually, by the time they get to us, they start flying around the exam room, and it's like, oh, please, you got to take it back. And that's the greatest battle we face. And we do our best to get the people to take it back to where it was. And we ask them to report back. And the reports are 95% totally successful. But what you do when you take a fledgling back is you want to stand about 15 to 20 feet away. And you have to give time. You have to watch and see where if the parents come back to tend the fledgling. And they do. 95% of the time, they do. Let's go over to the nestling now. As far as the nestling goes, to try to help the nestling is a little more difficult. First, you're trying to get it into the nest. But what if the nest got blown out? What if it was destroyed? Then you can try to make a surrogate nest with a berry box that has drainage. And you put the old broken up nest in it, and or you put grass and leaves in it, and you can put it back in the tree. Your job's not over yet, though. You put that little nestling in there, and you stand back 15 to 20 feet, and you see if the parents come to attend. They will attend to 2 nests. There are 2 parents in most cases. They're very devoted. This is their whole life force. This is what they want to do. They have to have their babies make it. And they will work so hard to make it happen. So if that nest works and the parents come back, your job's over. If you got the baby back in the nest, that's great. But do be aware that a nestling goes back, but a fledgling does not. A fledgling's just going to hop right back out. His time is due to leave the nest. With a nestling, you want to, with a fledgling, excuse me, when you've determined it's a fledgling, you want to put it in as safe a place as you can, right near where you found it. Maybe it's a branch in a tree. Maybe it's a tree pit. Maybe it's a standpipe. I'm speaking all about cities, and in the country it'd be a little easier. But just as long as it's perching and doing a good grasp, it can be on any branch and the parent will find it. And even something as far as just a standpipe or a ledge by a storefront, they can be there and the parents will come. I've had fledglings on the top of bus stops, and the parents come, and that was a great place to be, just in a little corner of it. And the kid was safe, the parents were happy, and they kept feeding it. But it does take a little time. In both cases, you may have to wait up to an hour to see if the parents come back. And if the parents don't come back, then you take that fledgling or nestling and bring it into a rehabber. The exception are the geese or the baby ducks or a goose, the precocial birds, because they're running and moving and they can get lost a little bit. But if you have an idea of where the parent is and you have that little baby who got separated, as long as it's not injured, bring it over close, not right to, close to the parent. Let the baby call. They call. And then the parent will call back and the kid will join the parent. And it's wonderful that way. Similarly, if you are bringing back a fledgling to its locale, put out seeds well, seeds will work generally because just another bird will come to eat the seeds and the baby calls. And that's how the parents locate it, by their call. So with putting seeds out for fledglings, you can get the parents to come.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you, Rita. And I think we've got some video of some of the baby birds that come through your doors. You said you have up to dozens of birds a day. So as we start to play the video, wow. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing in some of these images.
Yeah, this is a little sparrow, little teeny sparrow. When they are about 3 days old, we can save them. Younger than that, they don't have the immune system or the microbiome from their parents. We got cardinals there, little trio part of the pigeon, and starlings, and little woodpecker.
Yeah, we got a question in from one of our viewers named Bobby, who asks, what if I find a fledgling that's covered with tiny bugs? Do you know what they would do in that case?
Yes, the worst thing on those tiny bugs are the mites, and particularly cardinals. Like this guy here, he was treated for mites. The mites can, I forget the term, desanguinate the bird. They can eat so much, they can bite it so much that it has no more blood, die. So if you do not have mite and lice spray, then you would give it a lovely warm bath and you would dry it with a hairdryer. And then you also make sure that whatever it was in, you get it moved. It goes someplace else. You do not want to have whatever container it was in your house.
And is that something people should try to do themselves, or should they contact a professional?
They should probably contact a professional, but some people do not have any rehabbers near them. So that's the idea, that you can make a difference that way.
Mm-hmm.
These are all juveniles from this year, which is kind of bizarre and wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've had the chance to go to the center, and it's so cool seeing all of these birds being taken.
And squirrels.
Oh, and squirrels and other wildlife.
Those are not birds. Well, in addition to squirrels, birds are often the largest form of wildlife that people see every day in cities, as you know, Rita. But they face unique challenges with so many human structures like glass and buildings. And I know that you see the effects of that every day at the Wild Bird Fund. People bring in birds injured by window strikes, for example. So what do you have to say about some of those hazards birds face and what people can do about them?
The wonderful thing for here in New York, and I hope it could go across the country, is that December 10th, the New York City Council passed the law to all new buildings had to have bird-safe glass up to 75 feet. Thanks to New York City Audubon and all national efforts, this happened. Yes. And if we can do that across the country, we will save millions of lives. That is the number one thing that we can really change or have force on. The other terrible things the birds face is of course, feral cats or cats that go out into the yard. They're devastating. We see dog attacks. The litter that we put on the street not only affects the baby birds in their nests, it entangles birds, they lose their legs. We have collisions with vehicles, all manner of vehicles, cars, trucks, bicycles. The good thing about bicycles is usually that person picks the bird up and does an ambulance run right to us, which we're very happy for. And then the pollution. We don't even know all the effect of the pollution, but 15% of our cases have lead poisoning. New York is pretty,
Wow.
and it's every animal from the smallest all the way to the biggest, you know, from a sparrow to a mute swan.
Yeah, speaking of lead poisoning, I remember a few years ago, you and I actually had the chance to create a very special video with a bird who was brought in for a pretty sad reason. Echo the black vulture was actually brought in for lead poisoning. So we actually have some clips from back when we recorded this.
Oh, I'd love to see them. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
unfortunately he didn't survive, but his legacy lives on.
That's wonderful. He's a good guy.
Yeah, so you mentioned some already, but what are some of the other reasons, like man-made or human-caused reasons that people might bring a bird in?
Oh, there's so many. The dog and cat attacks, as I spoke of, destruction, where birds have been nesting on a building, and the building goes into construction or renovation, and they are outed right away in any numbers. And then there are people who, we do a lot of phone interaction and email interaction. And so we get angry calls. I have a red-tailed hawk on my air conditioner and he won't let me use my living room. And we spend a lot of time trying to get them excited about the prospect of watching that red-tailed hawk fend its young there and try to help them figure out how they can live peacefully together. It goes on. And so it's phone calls and it's emails, and that's the first line of defense. Getting people to think of the wildlife, the birds, as their neighbors, their fellow residents of New York. And we succeed at it pretty well, which is a wonderful thing, but it does take a great deal of effort. But I feel everyone that we've converted is among the converted, and then they are now caring for birds. So a great part of our mission is education, and it's one person at a time.
Yeah, well said. So we actually only have about 1 minute left in our time with you today, but I believe that there is a guest and a friend behind you, right?
Yes, yes. She's been flying a lot lately. Hi, Coral.
Wow,
Coral the
beautiful.
Kestrel, nice to meet you again, Coral.
Hi, Coral.
I'm just having my dinner mouse. Yes.
She's like, yes, let me get my close-up.
Yeah, here we are.
And
a
is Coral an
beautiful bird.
educational bird?
Coral is applying for an education permit. She had high lead poisoning, and this is another case of lead poisoning, very high.
Mhm.
And she, before she came to us, she flew into a lot of things and her retina is detached. But she's a surrogate parent to young kestrels, and they like to have a mature kestrel around to see how they eat a mouse, and they get inspired. And she does do a lot of videos for different classes. And
She does.
she's very well behaved, and she likes doing it, I think. Well, it's interaction time.
She's a great guest. So thank you so much, Rita, for joining us today. And thank you, Coral, for making a surprise guest appearance. And we're looking forward to seeing you all again in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all you do, Rita.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya. So now for our next segment, many of our viewers are aware of the racist incident that took place a few weeks ago in Central Park. So Christian Cooper, who is an avid birder, who's also a board member for New York City Audubon, and a Black man, encountered a woman who was illegally walking with her unleashed dog in a protected portion of Central Park called the Ramble. So she called 911 and made the choice to use Christian Cooper's race as a weapon against him. And that incident could have ended in tragedy, and we are grateful that Chris is okay. But along with all the recent killings that have come to light recently of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others, it shined a spotlight on the reality that many Black Americans have known for a long time, and that is that outdoor spaces are not equally accessible to all. So, in response to this incident, a group of Black bird lovers, scientists, conservationists, and outdoor enthusiasts pulled together the first Black Birders Week. And tonight we are very honored to welcome two of the organizers of this grassroots movement, Tyke James and Deja Perkins. So Tyke is my fellow colleague at Audubon and is a government affairs coordinator at National Audubon Society. And he's also a co-founder of the Wildlife Observer Network, where he hosts two podcasts, Brothers in Birding and Onward for Wildlife. Deja is a soon-to-be graduate of North Carolina State University with a Master of Science in Fisheries and Wildlife Conservation Biology. She is an urban ecologist, a science communicator, and a current coastal resilience intern with Audubon, North Carolina. So welcome to the show.
How you doing?
Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Great to have you. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Well, we'd love to.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Deja. We'd like to start by hearing from both of you. Deja, we can start with you. How did you get into birds to begin with?
So I think my passion for birds was really sparked during my first internship with the Student Conservation Association in Minnesota, which allowed me to witness spring migration for the first time at a migratory hotspot. And so at this time, I wasn't seeing all the warblers and things like that, but I was seeing a lot of the huge, like, birds of prey and raptors. So those big birds that kind of stick in your mind. And so for me, every day I was seeing bald eagles just soaring over my head, or I was seeing Cooper's hawks hunt at our feeders. And for me, this was just an amazing thing. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. I want to know more about that. So that's how I got into birds.
Great. How about you, Tyke?
My first job was an environmental educator in West Philadelphia. And my education manager, the teacher of that program, he was really into birds. So the program naturally got into birds. And so my first assignment was kind of like a book report on a belted kingfisher. And, so I looked into Peterson, I looked into Sibley, and obviously I got on audubon.org, got to represent. So I'm prepared to see this bird, and the fact that, I'm doing an assignment for work and whatever happens kind of happens. But when I saw the belted kingfisher on the cattail, and it was the female with the rusty belt, it did the call, swooped over the creek, and I was so present for that moment. I was like, wow, this is my job. And then I realized that job was a skill, and then that skill is a hobby.
Wonderful. What a moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I just want to know from both of you, how did Black Birders Week come together? Because this was a pretty recent thing.
Yeah, so Black AF in STEM was a group chat initially established by Jason Ward, shout out, he was in the chat, to bring together Black folks in science. And after reflecting on the racist incident that happened at Central Park, we sought to organize a week-long of events to show that to change the narrative, that the Black experience isn't just about trauma, it's about joy, it's about strength and resilience, style and pride. And although we didn't pick our moment, we definitely rose to the occasion. I'm very excited that I got to be a part of that, and very happy that, even though we've never met in real life, it's like we have this entire experience together. And I think that's something that's really awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I definitely think that the protests going on around the nation right now are bringing attention to racism within the police department, but it's also important that we highlight the fact that racism is not exclusive to the police department, and that it happens in outdoor areas and in science as well. It's important to highlight our differences, but to truly understand our experiences, we need to realize that not all people are treated equally, despite how much we like to think that we are. So I think that it was definitely the right time to have Black Birders Week as well.
Yeah, very much so. And in fact, in the days following Black Birders Week, you inspired so many conversations. Some of them used the hashtag because of Black Birders Week. People and organizations were sharing some of what they learned and the actions they were going to take coming out of the experience that they witnessed during Black Birders Week. So I wanted to ask you from your perspective as some of the organizers of the event, what were some of the opportunities that you saw arise because of what you did? Taki, why don't we start with you?
I'd like to say.
Sorry, go ahead.
Please, Deja, please.
Go for it, Deja.
Well, I would like to say that like Black Birders Week was not just about us as organizers. It was about, you know, Black people in the outdoors as a collective, as a whole. And so because of Black Birders Week, we saw the AOS offering free membership to Black biologists.
The American Ornithological Society.
Thank you so much. We saw the National Wildlife Federation creating fellowships specifically for Black biologists. And these are examples of organizations who are taking action and creating space and working to actually remove some of those barriers that are, you know, making it less accessible for, you know, Black people to be in the space.
I would like to offer a verbal retweet of all of that.
Noted. So all of you hosted, as part of Black Birders Week, a roundtable panel discussion. And Audubon shared both of those panel discussions on our Facebook page, which will drop the link in the comments below for those of you who want to go back and rewatch them. And one of the questions that you brought up during that roundtable was around how your white colleagues and friends sometimes invite you to birding trips that for various reasons you're either uncomfortable going on or at least need to have additional considerations for before attending. So my question is, what are those considerations that you have?
Well, for me, I used to have a dog, and when I did have a dog, I preferred to have my dog with me, especially if I was going to explore more remote locations, which is, it wasn't very often that I did that, but you know, it was providing an extra feeling of safety for me. And I also would always share my locations with someone else, no matter where I go, whether it's in an urban location or a rural location when I go birding. And I always try to look busy or like I'm actively doing something whenever I see people nearby, just so that no one can think that I'm not supposed to be there.
That hit on a lot of points that I feel too. Like I always tell my friends where I'm going to be, especially when it's like early in the morning birding. And so like the night before, I'll make sure to text them, hey, here's my location. This is when I should be back. Always let them know. But there's one thing that I always look out for from, you know, and that's a hoodie. And I think, you know, I look good. I think I look cute in hoodies. My girlfriend thinks I look cute in hoodies. And, you know, I know that wearing a hoodie as a Black man, as a Black person can just be, you know, akin to having a target on my back. So it's just like when fall migration happens, there's always like this sense of, well, I can't really participate in this because I think my safety might be in jeopardy at some point, you know? So it's just how invested can I even be in birding? Sometimes come to the question when I take these considerations.
Yeah, and as we talked about before, you know, so many of our members and viewers tonight wish that that were different, but it isn't. And so it's really important to be aware of those realities that you're facing. So we talked briefly in your bios about the fact that you both work right now with Audubon. And Deja, I'd love to hear more about what your work as a coastal resilience intern means there in North Carolina.
Yeah, so I am brand new to Audubon. I actually started on Monday, and so this is just my third day.
Welcome to Audubon.
It's just my third day. Thank you so much. But I was supposed to be out at the Pine Island Sanctuary and doing research, coastal research. So doing marsh bird surveys and helping on some restoration projects. But now because of the pandemic, my internship has turned to a more virtual experience. So I'm currently here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am trying to assist in any way that I can to help promote more partnerships with the Pine Island Sanctuary and other outside nearby institutions, as well as just thinking about new ways that we can engage our audience.
That's wonderful, and we're so thrilled to have you. Thanks for your flexibility that we're all having to deal with during the pandemic. Taiki, as Christine said, you work in our government affairs office in Washington, D.C. Tell us a little bit about what you do there.
So what I normally tell people, because in DC, a lot of folks like, I mean, back in pre-COVID days, a lot of folks like networking, so they ask you what you do. I would always say I'm a bird lobbyist because that gives them a perfect image of a birder that's like, you know, walking in congressional offices and like, protect the birds. And it's something like that, just less animated. One of my special roles that I have is organizing bird walks with members of Congress. I am, you know, a proud lefty, but also a proud birder on the team. And so I can always provide that birder community insight. And, you know, even with the COVID restrictions, I'm still finding creative ways to connect with, you know, the congressional staff on the Hill that, you know, do the constituent service for folks all around the country. And it's awesome, you know, having a job saying that I get to bird and get paid for it.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I've seen those photos of you birding, leading bird walks in front of Capitol Hill, and bird lobbyist is a perfect title.
Thank you. It really relies on the point. It's about pointing when
Right,
the photo is being taken. Like, it's just the right point. That's all it takes.
You nailed it.
Mm-hmm. So back to Black AF and STEM, there's this huge momentum that's, you know, that started off with Black Birders Week. What is next?
Whew, man, what is next? I mean, I think there's a lot of creative ways we can answer that question, right? Like, I think I made a joke on the ABA podcast with Nate that it'd be cool if next year's Black Birders Week featured, you know, the most popular family in America, the Obamas. Someone said it was the Kardashians, and it made me feel some type of way, but I understood where they were coming from. So I feel like it's worth saying I should say the Obamas and not just the most popular family. But it's really just building on the momentum that we have and seeing where our aspirations can lead us.
Well said.
Sky's the limit.
So if you could ask our viewers to do one thing to contribute to a more equitable outdoor experience, what would that be? And we can start with Deja.
Sure. I think that I would ask for people to think about their own internal actions. So really self-reflect and think about what you might be doing to perpetuate racism, or, you know, take a look and say, am I being discriminatory in any type of way or making people feel uncomfortable in the space? If you are, you know, being intentional about being more inclusive and inviting, you know, diverse communities into your organizations or on your bird walks, think about, are they accessible to those communities? Think about, where are you having your bird walks? You know, I think a lot of times people tend to go birding where they're comfortable and where they can see the most species. And oftentimes that ends up being in places that are in more affluent communities, which have better habitat. And so they'll typically have a lot more bird species that you can see. However, you know, if you are trying to reach and engage more, be more inclusive and engage diverse communities in your organization or in your bird walks, they may not want to hop in the car and drive all the way over to your side of town, or they may not want to, you know, hop on the bus and ride all the way over there to go on a bird walk. Birds are everywhere. You know, you can see them outside your backyard. You can see that in, you know, any park. And so I think that just, you know, relying on that connection of, you know, trying to make the space more accessible in that type of way, and thinking about where you are hosting your bird walks, or, you know, how you as an individual are being more inviting towards a person, is really a good start.
Woo, fire. Woo. Can I even add to that? Well, I mean, I want to, can I talk about like organizations? Because I think that was great.
Please.
Like individuals, you should think about that. But organizations, those of you who lead them and those of you who are on the board of directors for them, don't exclude the values of equity, diversity, and inclusion when you start talking about advocacy or building leadership or building power in your organization or with your stakeholders. Make a list of things, and this is something that Audubon did in the 2016-2020 strategic plan. On one of the last pages of it, it has the things we will no longer do. And it has those things, and it tells you why they don't do them. They, you know what I'm saying? if you can show that there's institutional growth that can happen at your organization, that will bring people that will help aspire to bring that up. Because it's good that you can learn. It's good to know that you didn't, you did something and that wasn't the right way to do it, and you can grow from that. That's good to show. And seek meaningful advice that you're willing to pay for. There are great, firms and institutions and groups out there. The Raven Group comes to mind. The Institute for Sustainable Communities come to mind. Green 2.0 comes to mind. These are great places to look for resources to help you really answer those circumstantial, those very, often confidential questions about how to run and how to manage this nonprofit.
Great.
Yes, and hire people from those communities.
Tell them. Hire. I mean, hire everybody in Black AF and STEM too. Like Black Birders Week, there's a bunch of great resumes out there. Deja, when's your last day of the internship?
No, the last day of my internship is August 7th. I'm a free agent at that point. I am looking for any type of, job, community engagement work. I lead bird walks myself. So, I'm currently in the Raleigh area. I'd love to lead bird walks, but I can't do it for free. So, hire me to be a part of Audubon or any other organization that, is trying to protect and conserve birds.
Right.
That's right. And thousands of y'all just heard that. So, for all the people who say, I just don't know where to find candidates, I think what you've done with Black Birders Week puts all of that to shame. And as you say, all those names and resumes are out there now. So to you two, to Jason, to Karina, to all of your fellow organizers, what a wonderful thing you've done. Thank you. We're thrilled that both of you are at Audubon right now, and we really appreciate you joining the show tonight. So for all of our viewers at home, we're going to pop up a graphic that shows some social media accounts that you can follow if you're interested in learning more and keeping in touch with some of these folks and staying up to date with what they're doing. So Deja, Taiki, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having us. This was great. Thank you so much. This is incredible.
Pleasure to be on the show.
Have a great night.
So for our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the queer community and the Let's Go Birding Together series. So as many people are likely aware, June is recognized as Pride Month throughout many parts of the United States. And it's a chance to celebrate the advancements made in the LGBTQIA+ rights, as well as a time to reflect on the decades of efforts and fight that it took to get us to where we are today. And it's also good to remember how far we still have to go. So in that vein, nature can offer bird lovers solace, but especially in times of stress, as we heard from our last guests, the escape and joy that bird walks bring is not always an immediate and universal experience. And this is one of the reasons why LGBTQIA+ leaders at Audubon created a series of bird walks that are intentionally inclusive. And we're very lucky to be able to talk to some members of staff who are part of making that change happen. So let's welcome on Gwen Causer, Jason, the bird nerd Saint-Saver, Jose Santiago, and Bria Wimberly. So Gwen is a teacher and naturalist at Audubon, Vermont, and a co-creator of the monthly Pride Hike series located in Vermont State. And Jason is a senior education manager at Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center and the creator of the Let's Go Birding Together program. Jose Santiago is the center coordinator for Audubon, Pennsylvania, and is located at the Discovery Center in Philadelphia. Bria is also based out of the Discovery Center and is an environmental educator who identifies as a queer Philly native and marine biologist who is interested in ecological restoration and racial and gender representation. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, Jason, tell us what Let's Go Birding Together is and how you came up with the idea.
Yeah, sure. Literally, it was sort of a happy accident. Back in 2016, I was just joining Audubon's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team, and we needed to create a project that would sort of outreach to new audiences. At the time, I was on the board of Out Nebraska, which is our local sort of LGBTQIA sort of organization for Lincoln, Nebraska. And I looked at the letters LGBT and I just kind of went, let's go birding together. And it sort of just happened from there. I just wanted it to be a really easy invite, like to an audience that maybe had not felt specifically invited before. Maybe they weren't out birding with us because they wanted to hold hands with their spouse and they didn't feel comfortable with that, or for whatever reason. And I wanted to just extend that hand and say, we see you, come bird with us and let's talk about what's going on in the community. And, you know, then it sort of spun off and I bugged David a lot about making it national. And here we have all these great programs going on all across the country now. So
you've had an amazing impact, Jason. And I do have to ask, since we have you on the show, one of the things that you're famous for is your imitation of bird calls. So I'm hoping you would share something with us tonight.
Sure. I hope it transfers through Zoom. I've never done this virtually before, but I'll choose our state bird out here in Nebraska, which is the western meadowlark.
Beautiful. Sounds like a western meadowlark to me.
Cool.
Great. Well, Jason leads walks and helps people learn the bird vocalizations with some really memorable impressions and mnemonics. So thanks for sharing that with us, Jason. So, you know, we talked a lot about why do we need to be conscious of the experience that Black people have in the outdoors when they're birding. So let me ask the panel, and Jose, we'll start with you. Why do we need bird walks that are conscious of the LGBTQ community?
So when you're intentionally inclusive about a space, the point is that it's supposed to be safe. A lot of times in places where there aren't large groups of people who look like you represent rather than the same community you are, it isn't necessarily safe and you do feel like a target, especially if you're visibly queer. And so when you're forward with the space being openly queer and stating that the space is supportive of your identity, respectful of your identity, affirming of your identity, it makes a huge difference on the type of crowd you're going to bring into a space.
Thank you, Jose. Gwen, how about you?
Well, I would really like to say that it's not enough to just say that Audubon is open to everyone and welcoming to everyone. We really, like Jose was saying, we really need to create those safe, affirming spaces. And it's more than just, you know, people are not barred from coming in, but creating that safe space and that trust and radical acceptance, it's really something that has been maintained. And then the other thing that really can't be overlooked is the actual physical safety out there, especially for trans and gender non-binary people on the trail. It's been a real issue. And I've been leading these pride hikes in Vermont every month going on. And it's amazing the kinds of stories that come out on the trail of not being safe out in the woods. Excuse me.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to light and for leading these hikes across the state. So we would be remiss if we didn't pause for a moment during this month to reflect on the contributions of queer people of color in the gay liberation movement. They were a huge part of the movement and the Stonewall riots, which began in 1969 when police raided the Stonewall Inn, which is a gay bar in Manhattan that still exists today, actually, and is not too far from the New York office. So these riots became known as a turning point for gay rights in America, even though the fight started long before that. And a year later, the first Christopher Street Liberation Day March happened in New York City. So we have a slide that we'll share just calling out some of the Black and brown leaders that were at the forefront of this uprising all along. So on the left, we have Stormé de la Verre, who was a drag king and identified as a butch lesbian, who some have said may have thrown the first punch in the Stonewall uprising. And in the middle, we have Miss Major Griffin Gracie, who is a trans woman and activist who was on the front lines during the night of the riots in 1969. And Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson were both transgender women and drag performers who were key figures in the movement. And together they founded a collective called STAR, which became a home for trans people of color and also a collective for helping queer and trans youth. So I have a question, opening it up to some of our panelists here. Have these icons or have other leaders inspired you in your conservation careers or in your lives? And we can start with Bria.
Yeah, so Stonewall is a very important movement in the LGBTQ history. Marsha P. Johnson, a proud Black trans woman, threw a brick, started a movement. She inspired me in a way just to be brave for the work that I'm doing right here. It's easy to, hide who you are because you're afraid of repercussions. But her and, other queer trans activists, they were proud of themselves and how they identified themselves. And that's something that I'm hoping to do as well in my conservation career. Stonewall, it was mainly about police brutality, and especially police brutality with the LGBTQ people of color. So for her to be on the forefront and to throw that first brick is very inspiring. And as a queer person in conservation and wanting to, bluntly say, help save the world, I also want to be proud and say that I'm a queer person and we deserve space in this conservation. We all come from the same earth, so we should all be accessible of this.
Yes, snaps for that. So what about you, Jose?
So I did not, so start off, I like to say that I'm second generation queer. Both my mothers are lesbian women, both born out of the country. English was not, it's June, she's a ring-necked dove.
Special guest.
Babysitting her, yeah. But that is to say that my entire life has been led by queer women of color. So when I found out about Stonewall, as I got into college and got more access to that information that wasn't taught or isn't taught publicly, it completely made sense to me. I was like, yeah, women of color leading the way. It makes perfect sense to me. So it wasn't anything new. When given the chance, queer women of color make space and lead the way and create environments that are just better.
Thank you. And I love your little, your friend there. So what about you, Jason?
Yeah, so funny enough, I mean, I'm the very opposite story. I'm, small kid from small town, South Dakota. It took until I moved to New York City in 1993 to quite really understand both who I was as a person, as a gay man, and then also to learn a lot of the history that I wasn't taught any other place. So one of the first things I did was visit Stonewall and meet some people that had lived in New York City longer, that knew that history and kind of understood. So I have to say I came to that game a little late, but I was certainly inspired. I think that helped me grow as the person that could then consider creating something that would be much more inclusive in something I love, which is birding. So.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. And as we wrap up, I'm wondering what is one thing that you'd like our viewers to take away from this conversation? So we'll give a few of you a chance. Gwen, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I had some takeaways that I wanted to share, and I reached out to some of my queer community here at Audubon. So I had a few things that they wanted to share with the viewers here. For all the allies out there who want to do more, I would say that even if you don't know the very best thing to do, just take that first step and do something to be more inclusive in creating a community and welcoming the LGBTQIA community. Another thing I've heard from folks is just because you think that something is open and welcoming to everyone, it doesn't necessarily be the case. So you really need to say it out loud and to make clear that who you're welcoming and how you're making that space safe. Another thing I heard is that it's important to understand that not everyone is going to express appreciation of the outdoors in the exact same way that you do. So for example, if someone wants to wear sparkly booty shorts at a birding event, that is absolutely their prerogative, and it's gonna look different in the outdoors. And then the final thing is that Audubon really is committed as an organization to be inclusive of LGBTQIA folks. And it's not just during Pride Month, it's throughout the whole, so those are the things I wanted to share with folks out there.
Thank you, Gwen. Jason, what would you want to leave folks with?
I think the same thing I started with just think about a way, a group, a person, an individual that you can extend a hand to, an invite to. Maybe it's not birding, maybe it's over a brews or whatever, but someone that you want to share your excitement for birds or conservation with that maybe hasn't heard that message, right? Or isn't being invited. I want to hear their voice, right? Like I'm the most excited to hear from Bria and Jose tonight, right? Like I want to hear more about the next generations and other people's voices and not mine that's been heard for years, right? So like make that invite, right? Think about it, right? Make it carefully, make it intentional, but like just do, it's not that hard. Make an invite and like see where that relationship goes.
And on that note, Bria, Jose, what would you add?
Definitely mirroring what Gwen and Jason have to say, you know, make space at the table for everyone to talk. We all come from different walks of life, and we can provide different backgrounds to, you know, birding, to conservation. One thing I want to say for conservation and the LGBTQ community definitely gets hit the hardest. You think about the youth that are in this community, some are homeless, and they are going to experience, you know, climate change even more than others. There was a case study in 2017 that was talking about how 40% of homeless youth is LGBTQ, but they only make up 7% of the population. So there's a very big difference, and it's just important to highlight that. And you know, if people are watching and they want to become an ally, I'm hoping that will be an enough reason for you guys to figure out how you can, you know, be a part of this movement and figure out your role in it as well.
Thank you, Bria. And before we do an Audubon Magazine summer preview, Jose, last word to you.
So for me, it's just ask someone, hey, how do I make this space more inclusive? And if you don't know a single person across difference, I think it's time to look inward and ask yourself, where are you at right now in life, and how are you going to move forward?
Very well said. Well, if folks watching at home would like to know more, you can visit our events page at audubon.org/events. We'll drop a link in the chat for you. And I think a lot of the lessons that we've learned tonight from this panel, thank you to all of you, from our Black Birders Week panel, apply to all of the differences that we face in life, people with different abilities, people from different faiths. So the lessons that we've learned and been left with by our panel about reaching out, listening to people who are different, and making this something for everyone, I think is something that each of us can take into our lives. So thanks to all four of you for being here tonight and for the work that you do every day.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So
Thank
now
you.
we're excited to welcome back to I Saw a Bird Audubon's Vice President of Content, Jenny Bogo. And Jenny's going to walk through a sneak peek of the summer issue of Audubon Magazine, which you'll be receiving soon if you're an Audubon member.
Hi, sorry, I think I almost missed my cue. We've just sent the summer issue of Audubon magazine off to the printer, so the timing of I Saw a Bird could not be better. We're very excited to give a sneak preview to everyone of the issue that's going to be arriving in their mailboxes starting around July 11th. There's one thing I can't give you a sneak preview of, however, and that is the cover of the magazine, because it contains the winning image from the Audubon Photography Awards, and the rest of the magazine contains all of the other winning images and honorable mentions, and I can assure you they are awesome, but you will have to wait, because we're not officially announcing the winners until July 8th. But to make up for that, I'm going to share my screen, just a moment, and show you some amazing pictures of American dippers. These are the only truly aquatic songbird. They dive like a duck, they swim like a duck, they have this beautiful song, they hunt for insects in waterways. Photographer Michael Forsberg spent several years documenting these American dippers around Rocky Mountain National Park. And American dippers are actually a really great indicator of riparian health, the health of waterways as well, because they need clean, fast-flowing water in order to thrive. So this was the first issue of Audubon magazine that we produced and shipped entirely from our homes as we were sheltering in place along with all of you. And so we really wanted the magazine to reflect and examine the events that we all experienced this spring. We took the front of the magazine and we devoted it entirely to a special section that looked at the effect of COVID-19 on birding and conservation. And that includes everything from the way it affected local birding economies. This, for example, is a photo of Mickey Marsh, where the biggest week in American birding is typically held every May, to things like air quality and shorebird monitoring. There was a lot of important science that didn't happen this spring. There are also some upsides to not having so many people in the world, such as quieter cities and cleaner air. We then looked at where we go from here. How do we use this opportunity to ensure the future of birds and people? We looked at the link between wildlife health and human health. As protests rippled across the nation, we also asked Karina Newsom, who is one of the founders of the Blackbirders Week that you heard about earlier, to write about racism in the outdoors and to talk about the truly hard work that the birding community is going to have to do to make outdoors and birding more inclusive. I'll give you a really quick sneak peek of two of our feature stories. This one is a charming story in a Florida community that has really embraced its population of burrowing owls. The owls on Marco Island nest everywhere. They nest in the edges of parking lots, on highway medians, in vacant lots, in front yards, and schoolyards. And residents have really stepped up and rallied around the birds to ensure they're not squeezed out by development. And they're also helping with research that will lead scientists to better understand the Florida subspecies of burrowing owl and ultimately sort of help with their survival as well. Now we looked at a more serious topic, and that is the staggering amount of plastic waste that is coming our way. Some of you may be surprised to learn that more than half of plastic ever created was created in the past 15 years. The oil and gas industry plans to triple the amount of plastic in the world in the next 30. Turns out plastic is actually a really great way to boost the profits from the nation's glut of natural gas. Of course, that produces an incredible amount of pollution at every step along the way. From the regions where gas is extracted to the communities where they live in very close proximity to massive petrochemical facilities that put out a tremendous amount of air pollution, to the marshes and beaches where these tiny plastic pellets that are produced bounce off of trains and trucks and other forms of transportation and end up where birds are foraging. Researchers have actually found these little plastic pellets called nurdles in the bellies of Atlantic puffins and shearwaters and other species. We also talk about, it's important to note, there's a movement of people that are trying to document this problem in order to better address it. It's a community science project that is national and global, and we talk about how to get involved in that too. So finally, the back of the magazine typically is a section where we offer advice on things like travel. But this issue, we decided to make it a little bit more appropriate and perhaps something people would appreciate more in this moment. And so we reinvented it. This spread is called Fun and Games. As you can see, it is filled with puzzles and games. You can kick back with a nesting themed crossword puzzle. You can try your feather ID skills. You can learn to draw a bird comic with Rosemary Moscow. Another spread looks at how birds have pervaded our culture. They're really in everything from music to literature to TV to art. If you want to find a truly nerdy bird phylogenetically organized playlist on Spotify, you can find out how to do that here. You can also learn where to find the recipe for Blackberry Corner's famous lifer pie. So lots of different tips on birds and other things that you can experience from home or near home, and ways to connect with other people who share your interests wherever you are. So there's so much more I have not shown you, including, of course, the winners of the Audubon Photography Awards. So in order to do a deeper dive, you will need to look for your mailboxes or sign up to get an issue.
Thank you, Jenny. I want to live in Owltown. That sounds amazing. And of course, the photography awards are always a highlight of the year. So we're really excited to see those. I haven't even seen them yet. Can't wait. And, you know, Jenny humbly mentioned the award-winning magazine. In fact, her team was just recognized with another award by the National Magazine Editors. So wonderful work there. If you're an Audubon member, you should receive this about July 11th. If you're not an Audubon member, you can visit audubon.org and sign up for a $20 membership and start receiving Audubon magazine. So we'll drop the link for that in the chat. Jenny, thank you so much for this preview and for all the great work that you and your team do. All right, well, if you do one thing for birds this week, we have a doozy for you. So the Department of the Interior is fast-tracking efforts to strip away protections from more than 1,000 species of birds in the United States. They're trying to codify interpretation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act that greatly reduces protections for our birds. This flies in the face of decades of bipartisan consensus on how we should be protecting birds in the United States and in partnership with other nations to whom our birds also migrate. So we need your help. We are asking you to contact your member of Congress and ask Congress to take action so that they can undo what's being done by the Department of the Interior. So we've pulled up here on the screen what we call an action alert. You don't have to know all the details of the policy. We've made it really easy for you. Our experts have drafted some language that say what's happening and a suggested comment that you can make to your member of Congress. So you put in your name and your address. It'll automatically fill in your member of Congress. And then there's a draft message that says what's happening and what we're asking Congress to do. But it's really important that you add a few words of your own and say why you care about birds, maybe talk about a special refuge or park in the place that you live, because the technical language is there. That's very important, but it's also very important that your member of Congress know why this is so important to you. So we're asking you, if you do one thing for birds this week, take this action. You can go to audubon.org/MBTA for Migratory Bird Treaty Act, audubon.org/MBTA. We'll drop a link in the chat. You can fill out the form. It only takes a couple of minutes. And then we'd ask you to share it with some of the friends and family in your life who also value birds and want to make sure that they are protected. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for the June edition of I Saw a Bird. It's been a great series of conversations. We appreciate each one of you so much, and we will see you in July. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.